Okay, yeah, sorry this one took a little longer to come out compared to the first two behind the scenes, but it's just that this is the movie that has the most I have to talk about, and I keep having to redo the audio so I'm not talking for like an hour, because this is the longest movie, so of course I have a lot to talk about it. But let me just tell you, right off the bat, this movie had to be refilmed at least 5 times, maybe less. I could be remembering that wrong, but I do remember having to refilm this movie a lot. I don't even have footage from the first draft. I only have footage from, like, the second attempt, which is also maybe the third attempt. I don't really remember. Let's see if I can remember the very first draft, which was filmed in a kitchen, which was supposed to be in reference to the original A Dinosaur Story that also was filmed in a kitchen, where they met Dilophosaurus in the future. Unfortunately, since my kitchen has very limited space, it meant the action scenes that I was able to film were just terrible. Just the terrible lighting, the limited space just made the movie look ugly. Second draft included a few other changes, so in this draft, one major change I made was that the future was entirely populated by Thomas characters, in which, I don't know, the trains probably got fed up with humans and took over them for some reason or one way or another. And this would eventually lead to a scene where the dinosaurs, when they're visiting the future for the first time, they would pass by a lot of Thomas characters, and one of those, all those Thomas characters would be trying to sell stuff, and two characters, Den and Dart, would be trying to sell life machines, and Noasaurus would want to purchase it. But since he has no idea what currency is, the Den and Dart just no sales. And that was basically supposed to be the scene that references the life machine without actually using the life machine. All of Dilophosaurus' minions were supposed to be some form of train. I think Percy, Sticker Steamer, James was involved. They would all be there, but it eventually turned into basically a big Sodor's Dinosaurs movie, and that's not what I was trying to do. I'm trying to make a dinosaur story movie, not Sodor's Dinosaurs. That's too... In fact, A Dinosaur Story is supposed to be Sodor's Dinosaurs making a movie. One thing that did stay was this little exchange between Thomas and Noasaurus. Do I know you?
Not in this reality, buddy. Not in this reality.
I think I included that in the original, probably the third draft, and it did carry over. But then, of course, no footage from those first drafts made it into the final cut, just in case you're wondering. Just a few ideas, but those were ideas I had since the beginning. They weren't fitting well with a very clunky movie. Another plot line that was in this movie was that, okay, so first of all, it's now being filmed in my backyard pool, which is my portable pool, the kiddie pool that I've had since forever, and we just haven't found a use of what to do with it. All it does is just sit there and collect rainwater. That's all it does anymore. This was a bit better since I was filming in the summer, but the thing is, it was so hot outside that it basically drained my energy very quickly, so again, a lot of shots just got very lazy. So, again, action was just lackluster entirely. Another thing to note was that Quetzalcoatlus, the Quetzalcoatlus that died in this movie, the third movie, you know who I'm talking about. He was actually supposed to have a bigger role in this third draft, where he was supposed to be a supporting role for Pteranodon, where Pteranodon was just very cowardly, and Quetzalcoatlus would just be like, "Chin up, young one, it's time for battle," and then he would eventually die, and Pteranodon would gain courage after that. But I was just giving a lot of screen time to this character that was just supposed to die, and I didn't really like that, so I scrapped that as well. I think a few elements from that draft did make it into the final draft, but just executed much better. Like how Dilophosaurus pushes Junior off, and then Noasaurus pushes him off as well. Except with the location of where I was filming, it wasn't executed very well. That's basically what was wrong with the third draft. I can't remember what I did for the second draft. I think it was just the kitchen again. I filmed the kitchen twice, but I didn't like it both times, so I scrapped it. And then the fourth time was probably just me trying to do the pool again. I think I filmed both of those twice. Maybe it was actually, I filmed a few scenes of the final cut with that fourth draft, but then it was like poor lighting and whatnot, so I had to wait for when it was truly sunny outside to really get that good lighting in the third movie. So one final thing I want to talk about that did have something to do with these other drafts was the scene where everyone gets lost in different parts of time. In the final cut, we can see how that turned out, but the first time I thought of it, I wanted Noasaurus and a few other characters like Pteranodon and Daryl to get lost in time. and it would just be them teleporting to random points in time and even alternate dimensions. And this would basically be my way of plugging in Dino Duels and Movies United and basically all my other shows that I had ever come up with, and maybe even something random, and then that's how another way of Solar's Dinosaurs would come in. But again, it just felt like, one, I was plugging in my own shows, which just didn't feel right to do, and secondly, it meant that Noasaurus had to spend an awfully long time away from Dilophosaurus when this is supposed to be a movie about those two, which again sounded very wrong. There was also one thing I will note, though, is that during the Dino Duels world, Daryl was supposed to get eaten by the Indominus Rex, and that would make Dilophosaurus very angry when he finds out later on, which leads him to pushing Junior off the cliff, or something like that, something along those lines. But basically, the final result that in this movie is just 100% better than any of the alternate takes that I made before. I think the only thing that really got lost in those takes was just more of Quetzalcoatlus' backstory, King Quetzalcoatl. But again, he was just a new character that was just set up to die, so no point in him existing. And I'm much happier with all the other characters getting lost in time rather than Noasaurus, because that way Noasaurus can still spend time with Dilophosaurus, and all the other characters can explore different parts of the timeline, and no plugins this time. Now that I'm saying it out loud, it doesn't sound as crazy as the first draft I made for the second movie with the dragons and Dimetrodon being the villain. But it really does sound like I knew I had a general idea of what I wanted, but I kept letting other ideas distract me from the main story. And also the fact that I was just taking a lot of shortcuts with the filming, which not good stuff. So again, the final result is the best result. And now that I'm done talking about the production history, or like the filming history, I can actually talk about this movie itself. So yeah, the beginning of the movie has a lot of scenes where Noasaurus is just feeling down about the loss of arms, because that, again, in the original Dinosaur Story, characters died left and right, and the characters would just move on like it was nothing, until they eventually came back to life in the end. Wait, hold on, I'm just looking at the footage again. Why is Edward in the... Oh, that's right, Edward died in this movie. So out of all the main characters, Arms is the only one who ends up dying compared to the original. And I wanted to make it a meaningful death, like it actually impacts the cast. This heavily affects Noasaurus. It affected Red Dimetrodon and Lunatic, which was supposed to tie in to their time travel scene, which was, again, they traveled into the past of Nightmare Canyon, where they ended up doing battle with Kevin. I think I was trying to give them a subplot where those two would... Again, they would eventually deal with their PTSD by facing the Queen one last time while she was alive. But then I decided against that because the Queen had her movie. This one, we don't really need that extra drama added to this. We already have like some plot like what Noasaurus is going through, what female Saltosaurus is going through, and of course the whole thing with Dilophosaurus. Anyway, Duck shows up and Lunatic comments saying,
"Hey, this guy is stealing my theme song!"
Bro, what you talking about? That's my theme song. That's actually another thing that I've wanted to do since the beginning, because since the first movie, I associated Lunatic with Duck's theme song. So, and then I think I always planned for Duck to be part of Dilophosaurus' army. You know, in the original movie where Dilophosaurus interrupts Carcharodontosaurus' theme song and he gets mad. Except here, it did show up in this movie, just at the beginning, not during a big battle. Okay, so just a quick talk about what the choice of music for when they're traveling through time. Basically, every time someone just travels through time or goes through some kind of trippy sort of situation where they're just traveling between worlds or, you know, crossing dimensions, that sort of thing, I always associate it with that song because SpongeBob did it and it was just crazy weird. So yeah, I did it here. And that's why everyone just has these weird looking forms to show just how weird this scene is. Okay, so the future is very standard. They come to the future and they see a lot of weird stuff that they wouldn't have seen because they lived in dinosaur times. Sticker Steamer, she did make it into this movie. Den and Dart also made it into the movie, except they don't speak. James with Venexus Titan, which is a subtle reference to Sodor's dinosaurs because those two are usually paired up quite frequently. Although one reference I will bring up is when Duck says why the humans disappeared this time. It is of course a reference to the Mitchells versus the Machines. Except, of course, this is a timeline where PAL actually succeeded and robots did take over the world. And when Duck says there might be a human hiding among us, this is of course a reference to Diva, who, it's pointing at Diva, who is a human in just a robot suit. And instead of trains being Dilophosaurus' minions, Bakugan Mechtagon, which are basically like, you know, when Bakugan was trying to be Transformers. If I can just give a moment to talk about Bakugan, that's always been a passion of mine. Gen 1 is my jam. That's my favorite. Gen 2 is awful. I just cannot stand Gen 2. Gen 3 is a slight improvement from Gen 2. I'll say that. It's still not great, but it's an improvement. Of course, that being said, Gen 1 did have its bad moments. Like, of course, when Mectanium Surge came, Bakugan, again, stopped being fantasy monsters and started to become humanoid, mech-like creatures. And that was basically why Duck said that Mechtagon are from the dark age of Bakugan. And of course, they are voiced by Geekin Warrior. That was his name currently. He might have changed it. He constantly changed his name. I think his real name is Lucas, but either way, I love having him voice act for me because he goes above and beyond. Not only does he do the lines and he does them well, but he also adds voice filters to them. So he sounds, because he's the voice of Anexus in Sodor's Dinosaurs. So then when he does the voice acting, he already adds that voice modulator to sound more robotic. And that's why, like, one of my best voice actors right there. I'd also like to apologize in advance for headphone users because all of Geekin Warrior's lines are stuck on the left side of the headphones. I was not really good at, like, controlling audio at that time, so unfortunately, yeah, he's stuck on one headphone. In the first draft, for some reason, for whatever reason, I did not think to include the robo-reptiles. Like, come on, this is a dinosaur movie, we're in the future, robot dinosaurs, it makes more sense for them to be here than in Camp Cretaceous. I also could have included the Zoids, but they're not as durable as the robo-reptiles, so I left them out because I don't like filming with, like, fragile stuff. I always leave them on display, really. Only exception being Dino Duel Season 3, where the Stegosaurus gets transformed into Stego Sage. I think that's why I didn't include Zoids this time around, because I was always so nervous filming with that Stego Sage that I was gonna break something, especially with how expensive it was. I really did not want to go through that again. Let's talk about Dilophosaurus. I think I remember a lot of people saying there were two things they wanted from Dilophosaurus. One, change his backstory. Two, give him a redemption arc. For the redemption arc, I just flat out did not want to redeem him. This was during the time where Disney was, and honestly still is, giving us lackluster villains. Disney was known for giving us, like, very big villains and then very dramatic villain deaths. And nowadays it's just like, oh, look at me, I pretend to be a good guy, and oh wait, no, I'm actually a bad guy. And then what's my punishment? Just a slap on the wrist, that's all. I wanted to make Dilophosaurus a proper villain. And throughout the movie, even especially towards the end, the characters are constantly giving him a chance for redemption, but he's so far gone that he just won't accept it, which eventually leads to his own undoing when he pushes Duck off of the cliff, and then Duck, this makes Duck mad, and the Bakugan, they all belong to Duck, so when they find out what he did to Duck, they all turn on him, and that's how Dilophosaurus dies. I really wanted to give Dilophosaurus a proper villain death. So yeah, that is the one time I didn't listen to the feedback and actually just did my own thing. As for his backstory, I did not change it at all. It's basically the exact same motivation. He lost the race. All I did was just make it a lot more dramatic, which is basically stuff I did in the first movie, where I took a lot of elements and made them way too extreme. You can decide if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I personally like it a little more, as it gives him a little more substance, that he had a set future, but then Noasaurus ruined it all. Which honestly kind of amplifies Noasaurus's jerkiness in the first movie, and how much he's, like, regretting this in this third movie. Another thing in the flashback I completely forgot, I included Chomp, Ace, Toro, and Utah. This is, of course, back when Indominus and Orca and I were still doing the DKC, and we were still, like, I'm still very passionate about the world we've built with those commentaries. And of course, I was so passionate, I just had to include it in this movie somehow. And of course, I had painted those myself, so I wanted to show off my repaints in some way. So you can see throughout the movie, I do include a lot of my repaints. Toro is here because we have established in the DKC that Ace and Toro are cousins. That's one thing I just love about the DKC. Every time we revisit it, we always add some new nonsensical piece of lore to it that just makes it more complex than it really needs to be. New Orca was one of the voice actors who came up a lot. I had a lot of side characters that I said could have voices, and then New Orca volunteered for a whole bunch of them. So did Sketchy. So mainly, just like Geek and Warrior, who did an excellent job with the Mictagon, these guys did excellent job with all the characters they voiced. Like Sketchy voicing Pteranodon, like his disguise voice, and then his real voice. New Orca voicing Dimetrodon's father, which is just excellent, top tier work. And of course, Indominus voicing Dilophosaurus, that's top tier right there. Very excellent cast of voice actors here. Although I will admit, Indominus does talk a little slower than how I do this is that when I film the lines, I say the lines myself, and I talk a little faster than Indominus would like. So so every time Dilophosaurus speaks, Indominus speaks it a little slower than than the scene actually implies. So I have to come up with clever ways to extend the clip so that it can actually fit in. Otherwise, that's probably one of the more challenging bits, just trying to work on the timing, since Indominus and I work on two very different speeds when it comes to voice acting. One funny thing I'd like to note, so back when Bakugan Gundalian Invaders was a thing, there was this thing where Bakugan came with like a special code that you would have to rub in order to see the code. And throughout this whole movie, you can see a bunch of the codes are actually visible. So that just shows how hot it was that day, because this was filmed in the summer. And when summer hits my area, it really hits because it gets hot. And then when winter comes, it becomes blistering cold. Don't you just love living in Canada? I say that ironically, but I do love living in Canada. Oh, I completely forgot to talk about Space Raptor when I was talking about voice actors. Yes, he loves collaborating. So of course, he was one of the first people I reached out to when I was looking for extra voice actors for background characters. One of those characters was Zurg, who just shows up for like 2 seconds just to get killed. Now, that was before I saw Lightyear. So, as I said before, I do not like Lightyear. I think it's a terrible movie, specifically because of what they did to Zurg in that movie. Just turning him into future Buzz Lightyear and making him that just goes with the example of why I hate the modern Disney villains. But I just find it coincidental that Zurg was my least favorite part of Lightyear, and in this movie I have him die. That is a complete coincidence. That has nothing to do with my feelings towards the movie. And then, of course, Saltosaurus snaps and turns into Commander Salts, which, again, was something that was actually in the first draft. So, I always planned for Saltosaurus to just go crazy and show that, like, ditch his cowardly side and show off his... Well, the only reason he's cowardly is because of his past traumatic events. So, I think the idea came to me when I found out that this little Lego helmet fit perfectly on Saltosaurus and actually looked good. So I stuck with it. And, yeah, that's basically it. That Saltosaurus just randomly has courage. There was really not much else to it. Just to help them last a little longer before the others returned with backup. Okay, now I can talk about the different places everyone visited. Because, as I said before, it was supposed to be Movies United and Dino Duels and plugging in all of my different shows, but I didn't really like how I was going with that. It just didn't feel right. So eventually, I sort of did have a plugin though, although it kind of just confirms that A Dinosaur Story takes place in the same universe as the Dinosaur King commentaries, which is, again, the world that we created on Indominus Rex 1's channel. You can go visit those and see just what crazy shenanigans we come up with over there. And I loved it so much that I just included it in this movie. But I did find a way to just make it meaningful by having Saltosaurus, again, throughout this whole movie, she's basically just been having this existential crisis because she's always been the smart one, the logical one. And now logic is just being thrown out the window. Nothing makes sense anymore, and she just doesn't know how to handle it. And it's up to Amanda, who was probably the one who kicked off this whole thing, because she's just a Plesiosaurus who just walks on land and just helps her get through it, which is just like this little sweet little moment. I'm not sure if any of my words actually have any meaning behind them, but Indominus Rex 1 seems to be touched by them, so yeah, that's something to go off by, so I guess it helped somewhat. Yay! And of course, I just had an absolute blast editing this whole scene, just coming up with a whole bunch of different background gags. This is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, but again, it is one, if you haven't watched the DKC, you'll just be absolutely confused about what is going on, and you won't get any of the references. Ceratosaurus's group ends up finding a new home. That's basically it, because I guess in older drafts they just teleported to a random location and said, hey, this could be our new home. But then I decided, no wait, now that I'm doing this, I could let them find a new home, as well as finding new friends and new backup and whatnot. Like a new love interest for Ceratosaurus, even though it does kind of come out of nowhere. Although we talked about that on the podcast, which I guess I'll, you could watch the podcast if you want to see any other in-depth information and see if any of the information contradicts each other, because I've forgotten a lot of stuff I said in that podcast. I actually plan to include another Jurassic World alive dinosaur in this scene, like a Carbonemys and a Dreadnoughtus, but I completely forgot to film footage for them, so whoops! And of course, probably my second favorite of these time travel scenes is when they go to that big dinosaur war, which was supposed to be a reference to Hoops and Dino Man's other classic dinosaur video, which was that video where he pins all of his dinosaur toys against each other. I even have the exact same leader of the heroes and the exact same leader of the villains. The only difference is that King Terry wins because, as we see, he is alive in the first movie, until the flood claims him. Okay, next I'd like to talk about this little clip that happens in towards the first battle between Commander Saltz and Dilophosaurus's army, where the Bakugan roll out. I actually turn on a light. This was actually a little clever thing I did, because I think this movie took about 2 days to finalize the footage. And of course, sunlight is like, it's a temporary thing. So I was filming until the sun was going down. It was getting dark, and I knew, oh dear, what am I gonna do? So for this Bakugan scene, I actually turned on the light so that it wouldn't look too out of place when I'm filming at night. So it looks like when the Bakugan around, the light changes and whatnot. And this lasted until like the next day, where the sun was back and I was able to turn the light off again, and then it was just sunlight again. So, haha, clever me. It's a little hard for me to watch the laser effects because I've improved. In fact, one of my most recent videos, I've improved on the lasers so much, so it's so hard for me to watch this. Heck, the lasers themselves are just cropped images of one of my Bakugans, so it's just, what was wrong with me? So, yeah, Tank. Tank is the almighty god. Once again, plugging that Dinosaur King commentaries plugin is really obvious, isn't it? And to further establish that these two are connected, even during the last episode of the Dinosaur King commentaries, I included little clips where you can see Amanda and Saltosaurus' cards in the final skit. Just a shout out to Indominus Rex 01 for making those cards in the first place. And actually, now would be a good time to talk about, there are two characters, technically 4, that I want to talk about, which is Red Dilophosaurus, which is a character, again, that I made up a long time ago, and the Miragaia, Death the Kitagaia. Let's talk about them for a while. Let's talk about Kid first, since he's a lot easier to explain. He is basically just a walking reference to a character from an anime, probably one of my favorite animes, Soul Eater. His name is Death the Kid. And his whole thing is that he's like the son of the Grim Reaper, and he just has this obsession with things being perfectly symmetrical. Heck, Death the Kitagaia himself only exists because of a Jua creation I made. A long time ago, I made a fan-made apex called Stego Reaper, which is basically a Stegosaurus decked out to basically look like the Grim Reaper from the same show, Soul Eater. And then I was hoping I could do that in real life, but I didn't have a Stegosaurus I was willing to repaint into that, so I settled for the Miragaia. And that's how Death the Kitagaia was born and was implemented into this movie. Okay, so let me talk about Red Dilophosaurus. They are just high school rivals. And then when he won the race, he got the girl and he got the kid. And when he comes to the future and confronts Dilophosaurus, he actually tries to apologize and reaches out to him to try and get him to reach common ground, which again, doesn't work. I guess this was kind of a way of throwing in a Dilophosaurus redemption arc after all. But if I didn't really give it too much thought, that wasn't really my intention. It just sort of worked out that way. Maybe if that's something I would have rewritten in this movie, to make it so a little more obvious, give him a little more in-depth to his backstory, that after he won the race, he realized that he was a bit of a jerk to Dilophosaurus and he always wanted to apologize to him, but he never got the chance because Dilophosaurus was just evilly scheming and whatnot. Okay, and now to wrap it up, let's just talk about the many, many different kinds of music I used. First of all, I used a lot of Amphibia music because, as I've said before, Amphibia is my favorite show, with Hilda, writing right next to it. But, Amphibia is still my favorite because comedy. And yeah, the finale had just come out, and I was still gushing over it. And I absolutely love the music in the last few episodes. So of course, I used a lot of that in this. In fact, the scene where Noahsaurus basically goes to heaven is just pretty much a reference to when Anne went to, had a chat with the Guardian. Except not really, because I planned to do that even before I saw that. So, coincidence yet again. And of course, the final credits is no big deal, big band brass I don't know how to say it. The big band version, which is just like, I love that song so much. I also use a lot of Nausicaä music, and that actually got me in a bit of trouble because the music the first time I uploaded this video to YouTube and scheduled it to release the next day, it got blocked worldwide because of that music. And I was like, oh no, I gotta replace that music and completely redo that whole scene. Thankfully, not all of the Nausicaä music was copyrighted because there were some pieces that I really wanted to use because they fit in the music. Again, the scene where Noahsaurus realizes that most of this is his fault when Dilophosaurus is getting into his head, as well as the time when, again, Duck gets his revenge on Dilophosaurus, because those are two pieces of music that I recognize a lot from the movie Nausicaä. Again, my favorite movie. So I'm very glad that they weren't copyrighted and they didn't get the movie blocked worldwide. Also used a lot of Laputa music, a lot of A Hat in Time music, Security Breach, Ark, Super Mario Galaxy. I also crossed out that soundtrack that got me copyrighted from Nausicaä. Nausicaä. Why does Studio Ghibli music have to be copyrighted? You have the best music. Not as many Sotoro themes this time around. Still a lot of Little Nightmares. But I guess the MVP this time around is Amphibia. Actually, no. I think it's Super Mario Galaxy. Yeah, it is. Even though Amphibia, I love that music, so that's why I give that the MVP award. Can't believe I went through this whole movie without realizing that this was probably one of my first big productions on DaVinci Resolve, as opposed to iMovie, because the first two movies, again, made on iMovie, and DaVinci Resolve was the whole reason I was able to amplify the performance of this last movie and up the action and whatnot, because there's just so much more I can do and not all the limitations that iMovie constantly bombarded me with. It was the whole reason I was able to do a Dinosaur King segment. Of course, the credits and a lot of the opening credits and the end credits are all edited on iMovie, which I then transferred into DaVinci Resolve. Well, like, I exported it, then I used the footage in DaVinci Resolve, that sort of idea. You can see there are certain images, certain parts of the credits where I cross out a name with something else, because when I finished these credits and uploaded them, of course it was on iMovie, so it was just a full-on just video, so I couldn't edit it any further. But then at that point, certain voices got rearranged and whatnot, so I had to quickly just find a way to just change it up using DaVinci Resolve's clever methods, which is just, again, DaVinci Resolve, great to work with. Towards the end, I gave my usual, this is a fan-made reproduction and whatever, but I also added a little extra note saying thank you to the audience for giving me all the feedback necessary to make these movies much better than they really should have been, because if I had done this completely on my own with my own thoughts, it would have been a disaster by the time we got to the second movie. I'm just saying it right now. And of course, a little teaser there of a skull. There's an image of Triceratops in one of Kevin's little cave things, surrounded by two glow-in-the-dark paras representing the ghost dinosaurs, and a treasure, which is actually a Beyblade. Could have worked as an Easter egg, or it could have worked as a teaser for what's to come. But considering how many people really love this and how many people are saying, please do the next movies, please do the next movies, and I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. People want it, I'll give it to them. I mean, not this year, maybe not even next year. Year after? Who knows? Maybe then I'll finally finalize my ideas, because really the only ideas I have right now, I have a few ideas. I already know who's going to play Triceratops, as you've seen in this teaser, that I'm also deciding the treasure is going to be one of my Beyblades. I have glow-in-the-dark dinosaurs, so I will definitely be using those. I was even contemplating getting a real pet rat to play the antagonist. Of course, that would give me a real time limit because rats do not live for a very long time. But of course, the reason I'm not really interested in jumping into it right away is because I want to space this out to make it it's been enough time for me to think out the story, and also for me to just have time to focus on other projects like Movies United, which I really keep putting off because I'm a procrastinator. I am also doing the Trampy movies, and of course there's a certain other project that I want to get on board with. But yeah, as for this movie, that's it. That's all. I've basically said everything I can remember about these movies. If there's anything else like that you wanted me to talk about or answer a question to, feel free to pop a question down below, and I'll see if I can answer it or not. But until then, yeah, that's it. That's all there is to say about A Dinosaur Story. So, see you in the next video, I guess. Enjoy this last time where we look at all the references.
The good news is, they found a new place to live.
346 minutes later.
You know what would make him feel better?
Sweet mother of Tank! Amanda! Don't do that!
Amanda? We were in Destroy All Monster together?
I can't, Ceratosaurus. I keep contemplating the dreadful state of the world, Ceratosaurus.
I can't, sir. I keep thinking about the dreadful state of the world, sir.
Rule number 1 of a leader, everything is my fault.
First rule of leadership. Everything is your fault.
Want rowing legs? Like other people's legs or no?
I want to walk.
Well, what I want is more important. Duck, I wish for a hamster.
Is it Tim?
Who is Tim? And no.
Tim?
Who's Tim? And no.
How are we clapping? I have no idea.
How are we clapping? I have no idea.
No cheating? That's unfair.
And more than anything, no cheating!
No cheating. Hey, that's not fair.
No! Don't take me out, Doc. I can still out.
Don't take me out, Coach. I can still race.
Boys, we're in a heap of trouble.
Boy, you're in a heap of trouble.
Psych! The Lavasaurus!
Hey, what are you doing?
Ah! A flock of Desmodus Dracula are gonna feed me to a giant spider! Yes, Ceratosaurus. I've been doing some thinking. That's dangerous.
I've been thinking.
That's dangerous.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video from beginning to end. If you want to see more, subscribe to the channel and join the Zainreborn community. See you in the next one. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.